I grew up in western Oklahoma in the 80s, and for those of you who followed the western Oklahoma or Oklahoma at all in the 80s, it was a growing, thriving state. The late 70s, early 80s, and then oil price dropped from $30 to $12. Some banks had some major issues, and when that occurred is when I was 8, 9 years old. Oklahoma was not a great place to be, and no one in Oklahoma liked the oil business because they had all just made a fortune with it and lost a fortune with it. A lot has changed since then, and this state is thriving again. I'm proud to be a native Oklahoman, and for me, the future of my company is going to be a lot greater and a lot better because of what I witnessed in the 80s. Instead of carrying billions of dollars in debt, we do our business on a cash basis. Instead of gambling with every chance every angle we can, we try to keep things as straight and smooth and as low risk as we possibly can. So appreciate you taking the time to view this.
Oil, black gold, Texas tea. The quest for this lifeblood of the world's economy has produced tycoons and paupers. Men like Harry Sinclair, J. Paul Getty, and John D. Rockefeller made their fortunes in the early oil fields and refinement centers of the United States. The world's first reported oil well was drilled in China in 347 AD. Using bits attached to bamboo poles, that first well reached a depth of 800 feet. American Indians had known of oil in western Pennsylvania and had made some use of it for many years before the mid-19th century. Early European explorers noted seeps of oil and natural gas in western Pennsylvania and New York. In the United States, George Bissell and Edwin L. Drake are credited with the first successful use of a drilling rig on a well drilled especially to produce oil, at a site on Oil Creek near Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859. The Drake well is often referred to as the first commercial oil well. At that time, new types of machinery being produced increasingly needed oil for lubrication and kerosene for lamps. Up until then, oil was obtained by digging out seeps, where the oil came to the surface of the earth. It was soon realized that something more efficient was needed to supply the growing needs for oil. Someone had to find a way to extract oil from the ground. In 1859, retired railroad conductor Edwin L. Drake constructed a derrick at oil seeps near Titusville, Pennsylvania, with the assistance of an experienced salt brine well driller known as Uncle Billy Smith. Crude, primitive tools and a handmade steam engine enabled them to drill at a rate of 3 feet per day. A depth of 69.5 feet had been reached with no encouraging signs when one Sunday morning, Uncle Billy noticed something unusual. Upon inspecting the borehole, he discovered they had struck oil. The date was August 28, 1859. Edwin Drake and his associates had proven that oil in substantial quantities could be obtained by drilling. The boom was on. The oil from Drake's well was funneled into whiskey barrels and was soon producing a steady supply of about 400 gallons of pure oil every 24 hours, far in excess of what had been collected from oil seeps. Drake never patented his idea, permitting anyone access to use his methods. Drake himself only drilled 2 more wells for the Seneca Company and never became a success in oil speculation. However, the Drake well brought about the discovery of more fields nearby. This resulted in the creation of many oil companies in the region. An entrepreneur named John D. Rockefeller heard about the strike and soon put his genius for organizing companies to action in the U.S. oil industry. In 1859, he and a partner built a small oil refinery. By 1867, Rockefeller and his brother William, along with S.V. Harkness and Henry M. Flagler, joined together to create what would become the Standard Oil Company. By 1870, Standard had become the dominant oil refining firm in Pennsylvania. With the success of the Drake well, adventurous men across the country struck out in search of rich oil fields in Texas, Louisiana, Colorado, and Oklahoma. Many could not afford the luxury of a derrick and steam-powered drilling system. Innovative oilmen used a system known as a spring pole to power the drilling cable up and down. Having long been used to drill salt brine wells, the spring pole consisted of a flexible branch mounted on a fulcrum, with the drilling cable and bit suspended on the free end of the pole. The crew would hop up and down in the stirrups attached to the pole to make the bit jump up and down and chop a new hole. Strong backs and legs, along with a great deal of patience, supplied the power to drill a few feet a day. While repeatedly kicking down a stirrup was primitive and slow, the spring pole's rope and chisel were practical drilling technologies. The spring pole system was soon replaced by the steam-powered system for most wells. Using the concept of chiseling a hole deeper and deeper into the earth, but adding the force of steam power, wells could be drilled far more efficiently. Frequent stops were needed to remove the chipped-away rock and other material, bail out water, and sharpen the bit. Bull wheels and hemp rope, repeatedly hoisted and dropped, heavy iron drill strings, and a curious variety of bits deep into the borehole. Early transportation of oil from the well site included whiskey barrels pulled by horse-drawn wagons, and later horse-drawn tanks. When possible, barges and ramps were employed to ship the oil. In 1865, the firm of Murray Douglas and Company developed a small flat car with two wooden tubs for the transportation of oil. Dubbed a tub car, this car is believed to be one of the first tank cars ever built. Crude refining plants, or stills, boiled and separated into the two items in demand: kerosene for lamps and heavy lubricants. An undesirable product, considered dangerous and unusable, was discarded in great quantities. The product was gasoline. On January 10, 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, Texas, a major strike was made. What is known as the Lucas Gusher or the Lucas Geyser blew oil over 150 feet in the air at a rate of 100,000 barrels per day. Within a year, more than 1,500 oil companies had been chartered, and oil became the dominant fuel of the 20th century and an integral part of the American economy. On November 22, 1905, wildcatters Robert Galbraith and Frank Chesley struck oil on the Oklahoma Creek Indian Reservation near Tulsa, Oklahoma. The well they were drilling was named the Ida E. Glen No. 1, after the Creek Indian woman who owned the land. The well blew in over the derrick with a gusher flowing 75 barrels of oil per day. It was Oklahoma's first major oil field and the richest field the world had yet seen. Bob and Frank named the Glen Pool after Ida. Within 2 years, pipelines had been laid up from the Texaco and Gulf refineries on the Gulf Coast and down from the Standard Oil Refinery in Kansas to access the high-quality crude. Dozens of other refineries were built in the Tulsa area. That same year, 1907, Oklahoma became a state. During that year, Oklahoma produced more oil than any other state in the United States and any other country in the world. By the early 20th century, oil fields throughout the United States were flourishing. Oilman Jodan Trigg's family was a part of this adventurous breed in those early days.
My father, when he got started, that was back in 1919, that's when they used trains to move your equipment, or they had horses and mules, I guess, to move your rigs. And my uncle, when he first got started, he was a rig builder. When they build these wooden rigs you used to see, and then he came and started working for Trigg Drilling, became our drilling superintendent. There's one story my father told about people would go out where you're going to move your rig in, and they'd make a lot of water and get it all muddy and such because they could use their cats to pull you in. And it was a pretty rough time too. There were a lot of rough people and kind of like the old frontier days. If you go out to Perryton, Texas, about 10 miles south, there's a plaque there, and the Trigg Drilling Company got honored for drilling the first steam rig in Texas Panhandle.
By the end of World War II, the United States dominated oil production. By the 1950s, large American oil companies were concentrating vast resources in the Middle East, Russia, and Persian Gulf. Americans were forming a passion for their automobiles, and the shiny, new, big, gas-guzzling machines were becoming highly prized. Electricity, refrigeration, and air conditioning, now available nationwide, added to the need for more fuel. Domestically, long-established companies and new companies continued to explore and drill for this rich commodity. After graduation from college, followed by a stint in the military, in 1953, Jodan Trigg joined the family drilling business.
As I remember, from about 1954, 55 to 1970, it was pretty poor business owning drilling rigs. And my job was going around talking to the different companies trying to get drilling contracts. And gosh, a lot of times I'd sit on a bench for 2 or 3 hours waiting to see the engineer that gave the drilling contracts, and he might say, come back tomorrow, or he'd see me for a few minutes. And it was tough. We would drill about 20-some wells a year for other people, and we'd lose money on probably 15 of them. So it was mainly trying to keep your drilling rig crews together and your tool pushers and such. You take a contract you wouldn't make any money on, just to keep your personnel so you wouldn't lose.
In 1951, Carl Swan graduated from the University of New Mexico with a BS degree in physical education. While in school, he had worked as a roughneck on oil rigs. He decided to pursue a job in the oil industry.
My degree is PE, physical education, and I applied for a job. I was interviewed in Tulsa, and this guy that worked for Magabar he's playing golf on Saturday morning. He took a quick interview and put down my degree, PE, and so I go to work for them, and they send you to a school. You kind of learn your cookbook, chemistry, you have to be a mud engineer. But all that time they thought I was a petroleum engineer.
Carl was a quick learner and would advance rapidly through the company. In 1964, Carl decided to form Basin Drilling Company and bought his first rig.
Clint Rogers was president of City Service Gas Company at that time, and they were going to put in a gas storage field up west of Blackwell. And a guy I went to high school with, his name was Bob Gott, worked for them. And so I bought that rig. I was going to do the all-day work, do the work on those old wells and drilling some new wells. And the landowners got feisty, and they got the Corporation Commission. They shut that down, so there I had a damn rig and no place to go. And I saw A.J. Magnus. He gave me a contract to drill the first well. So I told him, hell, will you pay me quick? I don't have any money. He says, you bring the log in, you got the well logged, I'll give you a check. And he damn sure did it. And that's how I got started business. And then while I was drilling that well, I got a contract to drill a well for Kiowani. I'd worked for them some as just laborer and knew some people, so I got kicked off. And then I got tied in with Mr. E.G. Rodman, which was a real godsend. He was a hell of a partner.
Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, Carl formed partnerships with bankers, drillers, ranchers, any adventurous entrepreneur willing to take a chance on striking it big. Over his career, Carl Swan owned and operated several successful drilling companies. Carl would become friends and associates with actors like John Wayne and politicians such as Ronald Reagan. Once loaning his airplane to the actor-turned-politician during Reagan's bid for governor of California.
I had a company then called Swan Aviation. We had 2 or 3 planes in it, so I loaned him a plane to do some recruiting in, and that's how I got to know him.
In the 1970s, world events would forever alter the future of the oil industry. On October 6, 1973, the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur, Egyptian forces attacked Israel from across the Suez Canal. Syrian troops flooded the Golan Heights in a surprise offensive. After early losses, Israel, with U.S. help, fought back, reversing Arab gains, and a ceasefire was called in November. OPEC retaliated against U.S. support. On October 17, 1973, OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which included Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Venezuela, established an oil embargo which lasted about 6 months, in which they reduced oil production by 25%, 5% per month, exercising their collective strength against the Western world, almost bringing the West to a halt. Prices tripled to $29.43 a barrel, which resulted in oil-dependent nations in recession. Frustrated Americans soon found themselves waiting in long lines to purchase rationed amounts of gasoline. In 1973 and again in 1979, drivers frequently faced around-the-block lines when they tried to fill up. A national speed limit of 55 miles per hour was adopted in order to conserve gas, and daylight saving time was introduced year-round at the beginning of 1974 to save energy. Carl Swan, Jodan Rigg, and oilmen like them sought out new resources.
We'd always just been in the drilling business, so about 1970, 71, we decided to get in the exploration business. And as you remember, about 1973 or 74, the economy really grew, and the oil boom was on, so it was a very interesting time. We'd hired a geologist and had a landman and really started doing exploration work back that time.
In 1977, innovator Carl Swan founded Swan Energy for the purpose of exploring, acquiring, and developing domestic energy sources, including coal as well as oil. His friend John Wayne's daughter gave him hope that they might be able to develop oil from the coal.
She had some German scientists, and they're working on liquefaction of coal. And we had a property in Utah. It was a coal property, but it was going to be underground mining. And so we took that was what was Swan Energy, was a company that had that coal. And we took a pickup load of that coal to the John Wayne Airport in California, and they checked it, and it didn't check out very good for liquefaction.
Over the next 2 decades, Carl Swan, Jodan Rigg, and oilmen like them continued to make their mark in the industry. While world events such as wars and political upheaval in the Middle East, along with the development of third world nations, have resulted in the continued growing demand for oil and gas. In 2004, a young entrepreneur named Brandon Davis from Elk City, Oklahoma, took a sales position at a small oil and gas company in Colorado. He had grown up around the oil and gas industry and was ready to make his mark in the business. He answered a want ad promising 99% failure, 1% success, 6-figure income potential as a salesman for an energy exploration company. Within 3 months, Davis was the top salesman and survived a purge in which everyone from a 17-person staff was fired except him.
2005, I went from just a salesperson in the company to a manager of an office and had people working for me and developed a team, and things were going very well.
He became a vice president at Heartland Energy at 25 years of age, but nearly went broke after a management split caused his departure from the company 4 years later. He formed Bedrock Energy, which nearly wiped out after starting with 3 dry wells in its first 6 months. But a run of 10 good wells led to stability. In 2010, Brandon was ready for a bigger undertaking.
I was meeting with different people that had been in the oil business and had opportunities to branch out and start my own company. And I met with Carl Swan and a guy named Harvey Bryant here with a company that I had invested a chunk of money in called Bedford Energy. And Carl, I really liked. Carl's a neat guy, a lot of great qualities. He's not changed much over this 7-8 year period I've known him. I'm sure he was the same way before, and just did not like his partner. So I had made up my mind that I wasn't going to do business with him. I was getting up from a luncheon that I had with him and leaving, and Carl reached up, grabbed my hand, and said, "Thanks for coming down." He goes, "I really like one more go at this before I go out." And as things progressed, I did end up branching out and started a new company. Sold my old one, started a new one, and I had an opportunity to buy my old company back. Well, when I was doing that, I didn't want to use the name of my old company. I didn't want to use the name of my new company, since we're putting it together and forming something great, what I would consider larger and better. I called Carl, and I asked Carl if he had any entities that were out there that I could buy from him, and wanted to buy his naming rights to be able to use that going forward, because I wanted to give him one more chance to shine before his day's end. And so that's how it got started. Carl is he's just an amazing person. I didn't want a partner, so he's not a partner. I didn't want that, but I wanted to take his name and do something great with it. And that's how we got to where we are with Swan Energy.
While at Heartland Development, Brandon met a young petroleum engineer named John Herring who was just out of college. The two found they had a special chemistry. When his partner, Joe Kinlaw, suggested they needed to hire a petroleum engineer, Brandon moved forward.
I remember when he first came to talk to me, "We need to hire a petroleum engineer." I'm like, "Great, that's a good idea." I had no idea whether we needed a petroleum engineer or not. It's amazing how much I've learned since then. We interviewed a few people, and then you came in, and he really liked you, and I really liked you.
I'm glad you went and started working for Joe and started this all up, and I got to work with you a little bit at Heartland.
Then I sold it.
And then you sold it. And
I can only imagine what happened after I left there for a little bit.
Well, we did the same thing, just a lot slower. And we drilled wells, and you went off and drilled some wells, and I really didn't know it was ever gonna, you never see the picture going forward, but I didn't think we'd be sitting here today or working with each other. I'm glad we are. We're very like-minded, and we're both young and a lot of energy, and we're both vision people and can see, what we want out of our future. And it's nice. It seems like we get a lot done too, so and have a lot of fun doing it.
At Swan Energy, Brandon and John have worked together to develop partnerships that would grow their business and provide opportunities for investing partners.
We know exactly what we're looking for. We want something safe, but can make money. Not that anything's that safe in the oil business,
right?
But we're picky, and it's real easy. And how many deals we look at, how often do we say yes? Not very.
Not very often. Maybe 1 out of 20 deals that we see come through our desk get a yes.
Maybe.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with we've got some tried and true places that we know where to go make oil. One of the things I like is that we're still looking at all the deals all across the country. We're still open to looking at everything. We're highly selective, but we're at least seeing them all. These places don't mature, and even a single oil well doesn't mature in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It takes 6 months before you really know what you have. And on these big deals, it takes 3-4 years of leasing and development and drilling and completions and all that data to really start getting your handle on what is this play going to be, how's it going to get developed, what are the key factors in it, and okay, now here's how we develop it over the next 10 years, 15 years. It's never go get the land and drill it all up and produce the oil. That's just not how the oil industry works. It's development, and it's constantly moving forward step by step in whatever plan you're trying to execute.
The association with mature oilmen such as Jodan Trigg, Carl Swan, and geologist Dave Murphy have contributed to the success of Swan Energy, providing them with experience and knowledge they would not have had the opportunity to acquire otherwise, which Brandon Davis considers a distinct advantage.
I think it is, because it gives us a perspective of the oil business that's really not there anymore. Ideas that in a lot of cases have been forgotten.
When you work with gentlemen like Jodan and Carl with so much experience, and we work with others, Larry Singh and David Murphy, I know there's a few times that I'll get a deal from a county. I don't even know where the county is.
Right.
I'll call Dave, ask him about it. I'll read in the legals, and he'll know about 2 wells that were drilled within 3 miles of there, what the geology is like, what the risks are, what to watch out for, when it was developed, how they were drilled, how much it's going to cost, how to complete them, and the whole 9 yards.
Today, Swan Energy continues its long-term commitment to the exploration and production of proven oil and gas fields, specializing in the acquisition and development of domestic oil and natural gas fields in petroleum-rich areas across the United States, such as Texas, Colorado, the North Dakota Bakkens, and Oklahoma's McLean County.
McLean County is a pretty special place in the oil field. It's been developed over the last 100 years. One of the highest success rates, probably onshore U.S. as a county. Over 90% of the wells that have been drilled have been completed and found oil. And a lot of the other 10% that were deemed dry holes we're going back into because they weren't really dry holes. They might have been drilled in a time of low oil prices, and now we can go and make them economical. So it's a pretty tough thing to do to drill a dry hole in McLean County. From our perspective as an oil company, we go out and put leases together and put land together and drill wells and develop fields, and we're able to go out and drill good wells and HBP acreage, hold it by production that is, and add to our asset base. From an investor's point of view, they're coming into an area that's really safe. Like I said, it's really going to be hard for me to drill a dry hole, and we have the upside potential of drilling 5 to 10 to 20 to 1 type return on our investment wells. So from an onshore U.S. perspective, this is one of the best plays I've ever been involved in, and quite frankly, one of the best plays that I've seen work from a vertical standpoint.
Now I'm going to show you an example of the cuttings we get and how we analyze them here from the rock that we're cutting up. First thing we're going to do is clean it. Initially, what you can see here are these big flakes of black shale. They break as much as they're cut when down to the bottom of the hole, and they come up in these big chunks. You can see how they break, and they're very brittle. It's a very brittle shale. The Springer shale, it's been drilled horizontally here, 6 miles to the east, and it's more of a horizontal producer than vertical, but it's certainly a hydrocarbon-bearing shale. There's a little bit of sandstone, maybe a little bit of limestone in here, but for the most part, we're drilling through nice black shale. It's easy to drill, and it's a source rock where oil and gas is cooked, and then goes to reservoir rock. So that's what we're seeing right here, is drilling about 90% shale is what I call it, just looking at it in my hand.
The future of the oil and gas industry in the U.S. is bright, and Swan Energy is poised to be on the threshold of this exciting future.
As we step out and try to get into new areas, the one thing we have from McLean County we need to carry over is that safety factor. We can't really ever go away from that, because that's a key to what we've done and how we built our success and built overall production. And you know, we've had 12 straight months of production growth, and I don't see why with the wells we're drilling now we can't continue to grow production.
We drill in areas that are proven. On occasion we'll go out and take a shot, and I've been early in my career, I had some geologists bring me some big ideas that turned out to be big disappointments. And since then I've learned a lot. Now we go and drill in areas we know there's going to be production. We drill in safe areas. We're doing developmental drilling. Now, safe area, you can have a 5-barrel-a-day well next to a 300-barrel-a-day well, but it's better than a dry hole. Some would argue with that, but I personally would rather make some money versus none. So we do everything in our power from looking at prospects, where we're drilling, the way we put the partnerships together, and the pricing, coupled by our expedited funding compared to most companies in this industry, very, 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 very much helps mitigate the risk for the partners.
Swan Energy takes pride in being part of an industry that has created more than 9 million jobs and contributes more than 7% to the gross domestic product. Focusing on domestic oil production, Swan Energy plays an important role in the success of our American economy by participating in an industry that creates about 100 jobs for every well drilled. By continuing to focus on oil and gas exploration and production, Swan Energy is helping to reduce our dependency on foreign oil and is investing in our future by investing in America.